Hey friends, Patrick here, and it is out there. .NET 8 has been released, so this is now the perfect time to test it, right? And in this video, you read the title and saw the thumbnail. We are going to build a web API with all CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete with all the HTTP request methods, get, post, put, and delete. And additionally, we will also already use Entity Framework to store the data persistently in a SQL Server database. I'd say we dive right in, but first, please guys, if you like this tutorial and learned something, hit the like button and please subscribe to my channel. It does make a difference and shows me that you care and helps creating more videos like this one. So please now just have a look at that subscribe button, click there, please guys, it would mean the world to me. And also thank you so much to all my patrons supporting me. I love you forever guys, and if you want to support me too, scroll a bit further down in the video description, you find the link there. So thank you very much already, and now let's start with the tutorial. All right, here we are. As you can see, download .NET, and here it is, .NET 8. So of course, I guess you already did that and installed the .NET 8 framework on your machine, and you also have Visual Studio 2022. Maybe, of course, you can also do that with Visual Studio Code or JetBrains Rider or whatever you want to use, but in my case, I always use Visual Studio 2022, the Community Edition. We create a new project, and this is not the Preview Edition anymore, right? So if you watched my earlier videos, no Preview Edition anymore. This is the full official release. And as you can see, here it is, ASP.NET Core Web API. This is what we want to create. Same thing here. Today, no Blazor stuff, only a web API. So we click next. And of course, as always, I simply create a superhero API, this time with a .NET 8. All right, we hit next. There we have .NET 8 long-term support. Again, no preview anymore. There it is. Authentication type none for this tutorial here. HTTPS is great. Docker is not necessary. We enable Open API support, so we get Swagger out of the box. This one we leave unchecked. Do not, there it is, whether to generate an explicit program class and main method instead of top-level statements. Nope. And we want to use controllers. So no minimal API, because I'm a big fan of the classic controllers, let's say. So yes, please use controllers. And after a couple of seconds, there we have our new project. Let's close that. And not a lot has changed actually, right? So we have our controllers folder with the default example weather forecast controller. Real quick, the .NET Web Academy is currently open for enrollment, but only for a couple of days, meaning after this enrollment period, doors are closed for at least 3 months. So if you're interested, we're covering pretty much everything you need to land a job as a .NET Web developer, meaning all the backend stuff, Web API, Entity Framework, SQL Server, frontend, of course, with Blazor, and also deploying all that with GitHub Actions and Azure. So if you're interested, please check out the link in the video description. Thank you very much. And now let's continue with the tutorial. We have our app settings JSON file, the program CS, as you can see, quite small, and we won't add a lot here. Actually, only entity framework, data context, database context, registration using SQL Server. And here the weather forecast class. But what's new now, by default, you get this HTTP file. So we also have when you go to view other windows, then endpoints explorer, you can open that, you can click here, and then with that you get to the actual method in your controller, and you can generate a request. Now, what is this thing doing? It is looking for an HTTP file that has the same name as the project here, right? There it is. And by default, we already have, well, an example request. And now we can click send request, for instance. This is the new one now. So let's just hit send request. And well, the app should be running, of course. So let's just run it. And then you will see how this works. But I can already tell you, just a sec, there is Swagger still, right? I can already tell you when we send this request for the get HTTP request method, that's nice because as you can see here, you have your result there. You also see the raw format, the headers, and the request header and body. But here we see 200. Okay, this is nice. But the thing is, when you have, and you will see that in or throughout this tutorial, when you have post requests, put requests, something like that, where you need data, you have to send data to your web API, then Swagger is still better, because here then you will get example bodies, example request objects already out of the box. And so I still love this way here, because here we will have a look, if I don't forget it. If I do, please remind me, and then I will add that. Here we won't get these default example bodies, request objects, you name it. And I think this is, well, this is actually maybe the last thing that I would like to see here. And then maybe I would use the Endpoints Explorer with the HTTP file then. But of course, if you want to build your own documentation here, and you want to have your fixed request objects, not that typical Swagger stuff with the string text for a string parameter, for instance, then yeah, maybe this is then better. I don't know, it's up to you, but this is actually the only thing that is new. The rest is the same, but still, if you're new to building web APIs with .NET, and now you want to start from scratch with .NET 8, then you are at the right place, my friend, because here now what we will do is we create a little superhero, as you already saw in the name here, a superhero API or a superhero database. For that, we will also use Entity Framework Core with Code First Migrations, or it's not called Entity Framework Core anymore, of course, it is Entity Framework 8 in this case, and we will use a SQL Server Express database. So one step after another. First thing we need is an entity. For that, well, the weather forecast entity is here at root level, but I would like to create a little folder, organize this just a tiny little bit. Entities, let's call this entities or models, something like that. And here now we add a new item, and this shall be the superhero. All right. First thing we need here is an ID. All right, and then I would like to add a name. Maybe this thing then is required. All right, then the next thing maybe is a required string for, almost string for the name. All right, and then maybe, yeah, not the description, but maybe we can set this to first name by default, an empty string, or you make it nullable, would also work. Last name also empty, and the place. Okay, this is what I want here. All right, and now what we can also do already is we can create our controller. So right click the controllers folder, and we add a new controller, not the MVC controller. We want to build an API controller. You have a couple of options here. See, even with Entity Framework already and all the read-write actions, but what I really like is the empty one, because then I can just do it all by myself and the way I like it to. And it's, as always, the best way to learn if you just start from scratch and build up with every single method. So now this is the superhero controller. And bear with me here, I am using a fat controller here, all right? In other videos, and of course in other courses, .NET Web Academy and so on, we will definitely use services and repositories, stuff like that, a better architecture, of course. But here now, I really just want to give you a jumpstart tutorial, a jumpstart lecture, let's say, where we use a fat controller, meaning that we have all the logic here in the controller, but usually it's true that you should inject at least a repository or a service, something like that, that then has all the logic, and the controller would just forward the request and then send or get the response from a service and send that then to the client. All right, just my 2 cents here and a little disclaimer. So now for the controller, what we want to do here is actually when we want to inject the database context then with using Entity Framework. But first, let's just create a little get method returning a superhero, all right, with no database at all first. So HTTP get is the request method we want to use. And by the way, again, if you're starting from, or if you're a beginner here with .NET 8 and using or creating a web API, what you see here, these attributes, they just say API controller. You can just hover over that and then you see it indicates that a type and all derived types are used to serve HTTP API responses. So this is a controller. You can access this thing by using certain endpoints, certain URLs. Actually, you can type them in the browser actually, right, at the address bar of Chrome, for instance, at least for the get calls here. And then you will see, or you will get some data, all right? And here regarding the route, well, as you can see here in the properties, there is the launch settings JSON file. And when you start this here locally, you will see that our application, or you already have seen actually, that this is our URL, right? Localhost, and then the port 7111. Great port, by the way. Always different. Only if you're using the .NET CLI, then it's always the same. But using Visual Studio here, it's always a new one. So this time the application URL https localhost 7111 for this example. And then when you go to your controller, you will see API controller. All right. So now what you have to do is, when we again have a look at the launch settings JSON, we enter this URL. And then when we go, just jump back to the weather forecast controller here, then you enter the routes. And as you can see here, they are different, right? You have the API term here, and then / and then controller. And the controller in brackets just means that we want to use the name of the controller, and the name is always the thing that stands in front of the controller term. So superhero in that case, or weather forecast in that case here. So let's just try that real quick. When we open that up, so you see we started the application, Swagger opens by default. This is also a setting here in the launch settings JSON. You see it here, launch URL is Swagger. So then we will start here, Swagger index HTML. And this is what I mean when we try this out. We can also already see the example values, although it's not 100% correct. Swagger is doing that because of the date only type here, but you will see, saw that already in the API or endpoints explorer and the result now from the HTTP file. But here, as you can see, it's the same. Date looks now different, right? Not the same stuff you see here, but you also see the request URL. And again, you can just copy that, for instance, and enter it here, and you also see that data. And by the way, you can also open the network tab, run this one more time, hopefully. Oh no, not, I filtered for fetch XHR, which stands for XML HTTP requests. But here now we are entering that stuff in the address bar. So this is different. You're making a call though, but you have to filter for, well, nothing or all. And then you also see the actual call here with the preview, right? This is better formatted, so you can open that up. You see the response, not formatted, and so on. So this is just a quick introduction to all that here. And now we want to build our own API. So let's go back to the superhero API here. This is the controller again. And the first method, maybe it looks like that. So a public async task returning an action result. You can also say we just want to return an iAction result, all right? And say get all heroes, like that. And then in here we just return, well, let's create a new list. So bar heroes is then a new list of superheroes, like that. And we just start with one superhero here. All right, so new superhero. And yeah, ID is 1, name Spider-Man, first name Peter, last name, then you know this, right? And the place, New York City. All right, and then here we return, we could just return the heroes here, or we use OK and then heroes, and this then will return the status code 200. And this means then everything is fine. All right, pretty sure you already know the return type 404, right? This thing here, this means not found. Everybody knows that. Even people that have nothing to do with programming or coding or web development, they know 404 means there's nothing there. So here now, superheroes, you see it. This is our get call. We can try this thing out. But what you maybe already see is that we don't have an example value here, and our type is not mentioned here in the schemas. But still, when we execute this thing, we get our result. This is great, right? But maybe for our documentation, we want to see what can we actually expect here. We don't want to try everything out. We just want to see what maybe is the result. And this is where this thing comes in. Maybe if you want to see the actual type, then you could define it with actual results, so not the interface, actually the implementation class. And then here we say we expect a list of superheroes. All right, and we add one more angle bracket and maybe make this a bit smaller here. Don't know why I have this at that size. And that's it. Let's just restart our application again. There we are. And now you see the great superhero type here. Isn't that nice? And here now we can, scroll a bit further down, and we see the example value. And in that case, this is true. And now you also see what I meant with the string text, right? It's the same thing when we try to create a new superhero, all right? Then we see default values. And in that case, in Swagger at least, we would see a string. So what we could do then is we just try out the post request method, and we get this thing here that you see here as example object. Just hit send, you don't have to type anything. And with that, we can test if this then already works. We execute the stuff again and we get Spider-Man, but no database so far. One more thing I still want to add here. When we refresh this now, we see out of the box, okay, there's a new endpoint for us. All right, and this is great, right? So that this works and that they've edited here. So if you want to stay in Visual Studio, then maybe this is a great new way to test your API calls. All right, we can here generate the request, right? Send the request and get the result. There's Spider-Man. Isn't that nice? All right, HTTP file, yeah, save it, why not? And this is the get call. But now what I want to do is actually use a database, right? Because this is, well, we can do that to play around a little bit, but I want persistence here. So let's add a database. For that, I create a new folder, and this folder is called data. And in here, I create a data context. So data folder, data context. Why is it called data and data context? Well, to get some data and store data in a database. So much data. And we inherit from a DB context. So the data context inherits from a DB context or database context. And for that, as you can see, red squiggly line here. But if you press Control and period on your keyboard, then you get this quick fix menu. You could of course also click on the light bulb, but here then it says install package Microsoft Entity Framework Core, find and install the latest version. And yes, please do that in Visual Studio, because with that we get the latest package for .NET 8. Isn't that great? And here you can see Microsoft Entity Framework Core now version 8.0.0, or the brand new stuff. Love that. And yeah, you see that in your projects file then. All right, so with that, we got Entity Framework. And now back to the data context, and you see that no red squiggly line here anymore, right? This is amazing. But we are not done here. We first need some boilerplate codes. And the first thing here is a constructor, so CTOR, and then we hit tab. And here now we use a parameter called DB context options of our new data context. We call this options, and we also run the base constructor here with these options. And additionally, what we want to add is a database set. So we add another property again. Call this, or the type then is DB set of type superhero, almost superhero. Again, control period to add the using directive here. That should be the one. Yep. And then we give this thing a name, and this then will be the name of the table that represents the superhero entries. So usually you would just pluralize that thing, or the class name. In our case, it's superhero, so maybe superheroes would make sense. So why not do it? And it's already suggested. Great stuff. So this is everything we need here. What we also need is a connection string, and we could add the connection string here, but maybe it makes more sense to put it into the app settings JSON file. So this file here, right? Or somewhere else, environment variable, something like that. Because in the end, when you want to deploy that to Azure, for instance, then, well, it's better to do it that way instead of maybe hard code it, right? So we could also use the onConfigure method here to configure some stuff, or again, we just use the app settings JSON. So let's do that real quick. And here then we have, see it here, it's already suggested the connection strings section. And by default, we just call this default connection. And then it's getting a little bit complicated. This is different maybe on your machine, but if you're also using SQL Server Express, and by the way, if you haven't used it before, then you just Google for SQL Server Express, and then you get here, and then you can go to SQL Server Downloads, and then you scroll a bit further down, and of course you could also just use the Developer Edition here or the Express Edition. Both are free. Download this thing, and then you will also get at the end of the installation a suggestion to download the SQL Server Management Studio, or again, you just Google this thing, SQL Server Management Studio. There it is, download SQL Server Management Studio. This thing is also available for free, and there it is. And this is just, in my opinion, a great tool to, well, manage your SQL databases, SQL Server Express databases. All right, enough about that. Now, if you did this, you need a connection string. And this then looks pretty much like that. So first we need to set a server, and that would be period // and then SQL Express. Then we set the database name. So database equals, and then maybe superhero DB. All right. After that, trusted connection to true. And since .7, we also have to set trust server certificate also true. And that's it. All right. So server, SQL Express, database, superhero database, trusted connection true, and trust server certificate also true. So this is now our connection string, our app settings JSON file. Great stuff. But now we also have to register the database context or our data context, and then also tell entity framework which provider to use. And in our case, the provider would be SQL Server. But one step after another. Here, real quick, the program CS. It is small. This is great. So what's happening here? Well, I think the most important part is, we'll be building a web application here. And then you see these add controllers methods, and also down here map controllers. So this is important for using our controllers. We have the endpoints API Explorer, all right? And then also not necessary, but in my opinion still important and very useful, Swagger, so our open API stuff. And here, as you can see, when we are in our development environment, then we add Swagger with the Swagger UI. So this is the stuff you already have seen in Chrome, right? So with that, we can test our API. We use HTTPS redirection. See it here. This is all middleware stuff. So all these use methods here are middleware. This is middleware for redirecting HTTP requests to HTTPS, middleware for authorization stuff. And in the end, we run the app, right? I really don't want to dive too deep into that, but this is in essence what's going on here in the program CS, and you will have to add lots more stuff later. For instance, when you really use repositories or services, something like that, you want to use other middleware, you want to use other packages, you want to use identity, for instance, for authorization authentication, then you would always come back to the program CS here and, well, add some lines. All right, so maybe adding a service would be then builder services, and then you have the options to add them as a scoped service, transient service, or a singleton service. This is also dependency injection stuff. Made a video about these 3 options here, so maybe you want to check out the info card. But for us now, what we want to add, what kind of service we want to add is the DB context, but we want to use the add DB context method for our data context. And then we can give this thing options, which first we add the using directive. And then here, what we can do is we just say options, almost options. That's the one. And then in curly braces, we say options and then use SQL Server. And we don't know this method yet because we have to add another NuGet package. And then we add our connection string from the app settings JSON file. So here also you could hard code it, of course, but not the best practice maybe. So here what we can do is builder configuration, get connection string. You could also use the options pattern, by the way. I will link to that video also here in the info card. So connection string and then default connection. All right, and that's it. And now here we cannot use control period. Visual Studio has no idea what's going on here. So let's just save that. And after that, we right click the project, add or manage NuGet packages, and then add a NuGet package and simply enter SQL Server, maybe server like that. And here then you see Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server, the Microsoft SQL Server database provider for Entity Framework Core version 8. So we also need that for SQL Server Express. And when this thing is installed, we can actually go back to our program CS. There it is. And now again, control period or the quick fix menu, as you can see here. And then we add the using directive, or the reference rather, Microsoft Entity Framework Core. And that's it. But there's one more thing we have to add regarding the NuGet packages for our code first migration. So we actually have 2 options now. We could use the .NET CLI with the .NET Entity Framework Core tools, install these, or because then this thing is available globally for every project, and I did that in other videos, but maybe just for a change, we use the tools here just for that specific project. So here you see Microsoft Entity Framework Core tools. You have core tools for the NuGet Package Manager console in Visual Studio. Because when we install this thing, then we have commands available to add a new migration, to update the database, stuff like that. All right. So now when everything is going away, now we can do the following. We have the DB context registered here. We have our data context here. We have our superhero type. So this should be everything we need to add a migration, right? So let's try that. But first we have to stop our application. For that, I just open the terminal. There it is, and close this. And now I open the package manager console. And one thing that's already different to using the .NET CLI here is you do not have to be at a specific folder. So if you want to use the .NET EF Core tools, then you would have to change your directory, go into the superhero API .NET 8 folder, for instance. But here now, what we can simply do is add -migration, and I hit the tab. So that's because we have the capital A and M. And then, for instance, let's just call this initial. Build started. This is making me nervous every single time. Build succeeded. This is nice. Okay, this worked. And here it already opened the migrations file. This is new. Love that, because I always want to show the migration file after adding a new migration. So now what you can see here, we have this new folder, right? Migrations. We have this data context model snapshot. This is just internal Entity Framework Core stuff, or Entity Framework 8 stuff, Entity Framework stuff. We really don't have to look at this file. Actually, we will also have a history table in the database. Then also not really necessary to have a look at that, except you have some, or you made a mistake regarding the migrations, you updated the database, and then you have to roll back, then maybe you have to delete an entry from the history table. But this is for another video maybe. But now here, the initial migration. What you can see here, we have 2 methods, an up method and a down method. Now the down method this will be executed when you roll back that migration. In that case, it will drop the table superheroes. This means in our up method, we will create the table superheroes, and also, as you can see here, with the given types, and it already knows that the ID maybe should be the primary column, or is the primary key then, right? So here's the ID. We have automatic, well, it increases the ID automatically. This is nice. And then, well, nvarchar max for all the strings, name, first name, last name, place, and so on. This looks great to me. Now let's try to update the database. So for that, we enter update. Nope, that was too quick. Update database, even if the database does not exist. And I think this will not work, but let's see. Yep, there is an error. And why is it? Only the invariant culture is supported in globalization invariant mode. What the heck is that? Well, if this is not important to you, then there's an easy fix. And in my case, it isn't important to me. So we just go to the project file, and here you see this entry, invariant globalization is set to true. Let's just set this to false. Try one more time. Update database, build started, build succeeded. That was fast. And now we see all the commands that are executed. Here you see this is the history table, inserting something into that history table. And here you see it will create the superheroes table. Great stuff. It worked. So now let's have a look at the SQL Server Management Studio. There it is. We refresh our database, or our server rather. Time tracker database from the .NET Web Academy. You can ignore that. But here now in the superhero database, tables, you have migrations history, superheroes with the given columns. See it here, ID is a primary key. We can, for instance, edit the top 200 rows. And this means we see nothing, because of course we haven't added anything here, no seeding whatsoever. But we can add something here now. So for instance, what we can do is enter a name. Peter, nope. This, is Spider-Man with Peter Parker, and again, New York City. And we get the ID 1 automatically. All right, so this is now our table, our database working. We have one entry here, all right? So now we can make changes to our superhero controller. Well, I already said the term dependency injection, and this is what we will also do here. We will inject the data context now into the controller. Again, short recap, this is a fat controller. This is not the best practice. I have to say that again, but for this quick tutorial, which isn't that quick actually, I just want to emphasize this here, that usually you would, for better practice, work with additional services or repositories. But here now, just to give you a jump start, I will use this fat controller with all the logic here inside of the controller already. But still, the way you do this is very similar. Let's just say we want to inject our data context. So private read-only data context. We name this context, for instance. And then with control and period, we see the option to generate a constructor here with that parameter. This is great. Let's just do it that way. And here you see that the context is now injected. Now, when you would use a service for that, for instance, a superhero service or a superhero repository, then you would pretty much do the same thing, but you would then inject the data context here in that repository or in that service. And then in the controller, you would inject the service or the repository. All right. I hope this is clear now. If not, just ask in the comments, please. And then I'll do my best to answer your question. All right. So now we have the data context available, and let's just change our HTTP GET method, shall we? So here now, what we can do is, instead of heroes is this new list, we can just access our superheroes table. And we do that with await, and then context, almost context, and then we have our beloved superheroes here available, and then we just turn that into a list like that. All right, and then here we return our heroes. Shall we try that maybe? So let's just run this. There we are. Let's refresh this just to be sure. We open it up. All right, Try it out, execute, and same result, right? Now, maybe let's just add another one. So here now, Iron Man, Tony Stark, and the place was Malibu, I think. And now pay attention here. I did not go back to Visual Studio and restart the application or anything. I just made a change in the database, right? So still the same application. I even do not have to refresh this. I can just hit execute and there's Tony Stark. Isn't that nice? All right, but now we don't want to change our entries in the database, right? We want to do that with our API. So what we can do here is we just implement all the CRUD operations, meaning we have get already to get all the heroes. Now what's missing is getting a single hero by specifying an ID. And then we also have creating with the request method post, updating with put, and also then deleting, well, with delete, of course. So let's just copy that thing. And now let's get a specific hero. So now let's just call that get hero with an ID. All right. And now this ID is, of course, a parameter. But here now, it says it here, we also have to specify the ID in the route somehow. So what we can do now is, actually, we could use the exact same attribute here, the route attribute. So like route, and then in parentheses, we just specify the route, something like single hero you could use, but this is not really REST style, right? So what we can do here is in curly braces, we specify this is now a parameter and our parameter is the ID. So these two have to match. Or we can just grab that, put it here, and combine these two attributes. Because if we don't do it like that, so let's just say we remove the route, we save that, we restart the application, error, right? Because here now we don't know, we have two methods in the same controller that are using the HTTP GET request method. So the route would be exactly the same for both, and our web API has no idea, our web service has no idea which method it should use. So please make sure to add the route then there. And here now, well, we just want to get a single superhero. So how can we do that? Well, again, of course, our context, our superheroes. And here now, instead of toList async, we just say find async with the given ID. And what we can then do is if the hero, yeah, it's only one hero in this case, of course. So if the hero is null or is null, totally up to you actually, then we return, well, told you that earlier, right? A not found, for instance. Or if you want, you could also return a bad request and then here add a message like hero not found. Again, this is in the end totally up to you. All right, so now this returns the status code 404. Bad request would be 300. But if we find the hero, then we just return it. So let's save that, restart it again. Now we have two methods here. And as you can see, with 1, we get Spider-Man. With 2, we get Iron Man. And with 3, we get a 404, hero not found. And again, just for demonstration purposes here, bad request, restart the application. And here now we add 4, and this time, sorry, I said 300, of course it's 400. This time we get 400, hero not found. So all the 400s are the error status codes, right? And bad request is also then the 400. 401 would be unauthenticated, 403 forbidden, and so on. All right, so now again, not found maybe. And now the next thing maybe could be post. So we want to create a superhero. All right, so again, let's just copy that, and here now we add HTTP post. Here we can say add hero, and now here also not always the best practice, but again it is great for a quick tutorial. We enter the superhero class as a parameter. What would be better maybe is to really create a separate request object or a DTO, a data transfer object, where you then put only the data, or set only the data that you actually really wanna see in your request. For instance, if you would now here, let's go to the superhero class. If you would here have dates, like date created, date update, stuff like that, or actually already the ID. The ID is actually not something we need for creating a superhero. So you would create a DTO, a request object, a separate class, only with these properties here. For instance, send this to the web service, and then the web service would map the data from your request object to the actual entity, and then create this new entry in the database. All right. Again, just so you know, quick information here. And one more thing I just saw, this is not correct. So let's fix that real quick. All right. I know you saw that, right? You were yelling at the screen and saying, Patrick, pay attention here. This is wrong, dude, but it still works. That was interesting, right? So did I really make this mistake, or did I want to show you something interesting here? Think about that. All right. So now HTTP post, add hero, superhero, hero, so many heroes. And now what I want is actually just create that new hero. So what we can do here, instead of all that, we just say context superheroes and then add and then hero. All right. So now we will get a hero out of that and just again return all of them. But first, really important, this method here, this will not save that change. Okay, so this will just, as you see it here, it begins tracking the given entity, but you have to call save changes or save changes async if you really want to store this new hero persistently in your database. So then await context save changes async, and in the end we can actually return all the heroes, because here now the return type, right, is the list of all heroes. So maybe just await get not hero, get all heroes. All right, real quick, told you that earlier, but here now when we refresh, we see the post method, and when we now say generate request, this is what I meant. I just have this little comment here, and well, when I send this request, what will happen? It does not work. The body is not correct, and the body, that's actually also a good hint. So before here with the get method, this parameter was used in the URL, right? But here now this comes from the body. Maybe you've also seen something like that here before. So this is an attribute telling the web API that this should come from the body, but with that complex class here, the superhero, this is not really necessary. It just assumes that it already comes from the body, and this is absolutely correct, because again, when we now restart this thing, then we see this is our new call. And when I open that up, you see here this example value and also the request body. We also again get example values here, so we could actually just hit execute and we're done, or we just enter something here. So maybe we have Hulk, or no, let me add another one. Batman, of course, Bruce Wayne, Gotham City. All right, we execute, and what did I do wrong? Of course this does not work. Again, why didn't you tell me, guys? I was thinking in services. So when you have a service, of course, you would not return OK heroes. You would actually return the heroes. And then, of course, you could also use this method. So what we can do here now, the options we have is either extract this in a separate method, or we just copy and paste that stuff, put it here, and we're good to go. So let's try that one more time. And now we have the option to add Hulk. Try that. Come on. Hulk it is. Another Bruce. Banner. And the place. I actually don't really know, but the birthplace is Dayton, Ohio. So let's just use that one. We hit execute, and now we get all our heroes. And as you can see, Batman was also successful. So we were able to create Batman. Sorry for these little mistakes here, but you know, maybe this is a great way to learn, right? So post also works, but the next step now is updating heroes. And as you can see, I made, again, little mistakes here because this is not 100% correct how you write Spider-Man or Iron Man. So maybe we can change that. And for that, now we create the put method. So HTTP put it is. Now here we have two options. We could also add the parameter, the ID here in the URL, or we use again the complete superhero object here, call this method update hero, and then grab the ID from that object here. Because what we want to do is first we want to find the given hero with the given ID in the database, and if we find that hero, then we will change the properties or the data, and then save that and return again the complete list of superheroes. I hope this makes sense. So update hero it is. And also, by the way, maybe you will also see in web services that with creating, so here add hero and update hero, you would not actually return the complete list of superheroes, of course, because maybe you have hundreds of thousands of millions of entries. So actually you would maybe return nothing or just a success message, something like that. So this is not always the best way to do it, of course. But again, I know I'm repeating myself. I just want to show you, in particular for beginners, how you get up to speed with building a .NET Web API with .NET 8 now. Okay, with that out of the way again, let's try to find the given hero. So we did this actually already. So here now, let me just copy that, paste it here. So we try to find the hero, but the ID is now in hero ID, and this is now the DB hero for database hero. And then hopefully, yeah, the error is gone. And now if the hero if the hero is null, we do that, but otherwise we map that stuff. DB hero name then is the, I call this, is the hero name. Maybe we can change the name here actually and call that updated. You could call that request maybe, or updated hero, stuff like that, something like that. And then we want to change also the first name. All right, and this shall then also be the first name, then the last name. All right, and then the place is updated hero place. Okay, again we have to save these changes, so context save changes async it is, and again we just return all the heroes. So let's restart the application again. We see now in orange this is our put method. Try this out, and now you really have to pay attention here. Maybe we do something else first, so because we overwrite pretty much everything apart from the ID. So now here for Spider-Man, this should be ID 1, right? So maybe we can just copy that, and then here input, paste it, and this is actually now Spider-Man, like that, right? So we execute, and we see this is not correct. We could also call Spider-Man now Amazing Spider-Man, because Spider-Man just is really amazing. All right, and Iron Man, same stuff. So here now, copy that, paste it here, and it's actually that way. All right, execute, and that's it. Nice. So now again, a look at the database. We right-click and execute SQL, and here are our beloved superheroes. Isn't that nice? All right, now the last CRUD operation, the last method we have to write is the delete method. So get is here for all heroes, get for a single one, creating with post, updating with puts, and now let's just remove one hero. So in that case, we will use delete as HTTP request method. We can call this also delete parameters again, an ID like that. And we try to find this guy, of course, with the given ID. Same thing. And instead of setting the properties now, we say context superheroes remove. There it is. db hero. And again, this method doesn't actually change anything. Again, it just begins tracking. So we have to call save changes async to make this persistent. Save that, restart the application. And now in red, because it's really dangerous, try it out. And what about 5? Execute, hero not found. Okay, worked. 4, yep, Hulk was deleted. Now we only have Amazing Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Batman, of course. So now in the database again, refresh. That's it. Great. So I hoped you learned something, guys. And if you did and liked this tutorial, then please hit the like button. Please subscribe to my channel. It would mean the world to me. And thank you so much to all my patrons supporting me. This is how this channel can grow, with all your subscriptions, likes, and of course your support on my Patreon page. Check out the link in the video description below if you want to support me too. Now I can only say check out these videos here on the side, and there's a lot coming regarding Blazor, of course, and .NET 8, so stay tuned. Maybe you really want to subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you next time. Take care.